The Global Leadership Summit was today, the first day, and I want to talk to you about that. I had an amazing time. Hello, welcome. It was a great day of good speakers, and I got to meet some really awesome people. I want to talk about that. The topic, it kind of leads me to the topic today of what I did in the Marine Corps to what I do now as a strategist. I walked in, sat down, I got there early, and I was sitting there reading and just reviewing some books that I have in my bag right now. I'm reviewing The Leadership Challenge by Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner. I'm reviewing a book named Grit by Angela Duckworth. I've got my Maxwell Daily Reader. I had a lot of stuff. So I had my books all kind of laid out on this table as people were walking in and just going through. People were coming up, introducing themselves, and then they were just, kind of dismissing themselves. But it was really, really good. So this Global Leadership Summit was really, really great. And I had a guy sat down next to me who turned out he was in the military. He's actually currently in the military now. He's in the Guard, and he is a Black Hawk. He flies H-60s, and he's a Black Hawk pilot. And so naturally, we just instantly connect, and we just start talking about different stuff. So it was interesting that during the time I sat with him, he was asking me, kind of what I did now. And I talked about being a strategist. And later in the day, as we connected, he had this really great question was, based on, obviously you can see the title here, what I did in the Marines, was there any connection to what I did in the Marines to what I do now as a strategist? And I had made that connection in the past before, but I was like, yeah, actually there's a lot of connections to what we used to do in the Marine Corps as navigators, and what I do now is kind of just the culmination of that. So I want to talk about that today. And I got some cool photos to show you. So before I get too far down the road, for those of you, in case I forget, some of you have been joining. It's been great to meet with some of you. If you are interested, I'm just putting the whole photo up so you can see it. This is the Facebook group. You're welcome. There's there's almost 500 members in there now. The Time Wealthy Advantage. It is there's a link in the description. If you would like to join, you are more than welcome. Just look for that photo, and or you can just click on the link down there. It's under Time Wealthy Advantage, Time Wealthy VIP. You can find it that way in groups, but no jerks. If you're a jerk, you're gonna get booted. All right, just be nice. Okay, so I have some pretty cool photos. I actually did. I was going through some of my old photos, and none of them are digitized. So what I was talking about here was just different things related to what I did in the Marine Corps, and what I did specifically. I was a navigator on the Lockheed KC-130. Now the KC-130 designation, the K designation, if you will, is it designates that it was a refueler. So that means that it had refueling drogues or pods at the end of each wing, which you may not have ever really noticed before. But if you look at the photo, let me get my big mug out of the way here. But if you look at the end of each wingtip, you'll see that hose that comes out of that refueling pod. And that refueling pod obviously has two hoses that come out, and at the end of the hoses are the drogues. So, and then on the inboard side of those, you'll see those what are on the inside. You might see two pods on the inside. Those are actually fuel tanks that sit inside, and not every C-130 has those. I know if I'm going to get this, I'm taxing my memory here a little bit, but the F models did not have those. The R models did have those, if I'm remembering correctly. And they added quite a bit of fuel that, and there was this, if you really wanted to have a monster amount of fuel, you could have this big fuel bladder that was installed inside there. So it's just basically just a flying gas tank, basically a flying gas station. And that held a ton of fuel. I mean, we would take off with just as much fuel. I think the max weight, and again, I mean, we could take off with just as much fuel as the plane weighed, because we were just pretty much taking off with a full bag of fuel. So those are some of the things. Now, the interesting thing about the C-130 is that it was extremely versatile. Like here, you could see refueling to CH-53s. There's Sikorsky CH-53s, which are some really heavy lift helicopters, and they were just freaking monsters. In fact, when we were refueling those, you could actually feel it. And for those of you who are maybe aircraft inclined, you can see the flaps are down on the C-130 because they were flying a lot slower. We would fly low, we had to fly slow so the aircraft can catch up to us. And the aircraft obviously flew a lot faster than the helicopters, so they're flying about as fast as they can go, and we're flying about as slow as we can go, depending on how heavy we were. So was not my most favorite thing to do, refueling these guys, but it was it was a pretty cool thing. Then you get to see these. This is where we were refueling AV-8Bs. These were the Harriers, and you could refuel all sorts of stuff. I mean, we refueled mostly what we gassed in the air was F-18s were pretty. We didn't have the Super Hornet quite yet; that hadn't been developed. We refueled a lot of AV-8Bs out of North Carolina. We saw those quite a bit, but then then when we got to the fleet, we did a lot of F-18s. We every now and again we would get an EA-6, something along those lines, but mostly we were refueling F-18s, and it was just really cool, just a really cool opportunity to see that stuff. And you can go to the back and see them. But when we were actually gassing the CH-53s, you could feel it. Like you can feel them closing in on you, and you could actually feel it in the seat. Just the rotor wash. It was, I mean, it was pretty cool. And then I think about it, I think it was because the rotor wash actually was hitting the what do you want to call it? The hose. The rotor wash was hitting the hose, and it was transferring to the aircraft. So I could definitely. It wasn't like it was rattling me out of my seat, but you could definitely feel it in your seat. It's kind of cool. But the C-130 was so versatile. You know, we did static line delivery where you've got troops that are jumping out, and this is called static line. And then these were halo jumpers. Sometimes they were high altitude, low opening, where they just jumped out, then they pulled their own chute, or halo or hey-ho, high altitude, high opening, high altitude, low opening, sometimes low altitude, low opening, but different types of things like that. So it was just really cool, just a really, really neat job in the Marine Corps. And it was one of those things where you kind of think like you don't really know what you're doing until you're in the middle of it, and you didn't really know what to expect as you were doing this thing, because you just didn't know any better. You just knew the job that you had to do. And we were celestial navigators. So as celestial navigators, we actually, when we were flying across the Pacific Ocean or vast expanses of ocean, we had to shoot cell because we did have INS, inertial navigation systems, on the airplane, but we had to back that up with celestial navigation, meaning we were getting fixes from the stars through the sextant port in the aircraft. And it was like, are you kidding me? Right? You open up this old sextant, and the sextant box smelled like something out of your granddad's basement. Like it was just old and oily and just stunk of just really old, but it was extremely delicate. It was an extremely delicate piece of equipment, and you had to be careful with it. But the nice thing about that was it was reliable. Like the celestial navigation was, as old as it was actually very reliable, as long as you had a good air almanac and you could do the geometry. So it was actually pretty cool, and not bad for a guy that basically failed every math class I was ever in. So Marine Corps did right by me for sure. So the question here tonight that on this, but the crux of the issue is, or the crux of tonight's message is, from the Marines to basically being a strategist, was there a direct correlation? And as navigators, yes, we were on the airplanes, but we were also mission planners. And I remember there was one time, I think there was a G6 summit that was happening in the Philippines. And it was interesting because we were in Okinawa, and the Philippines was maybe a 3-hour flight south. I don't remember exactly, but it wasn't that far. Back of the napkin, it was maybe 1,000 nautical miles just due south from Okinawa to Manila. So if you looked, and I know, hold on a second. Let me get, there we go. So I know most Americans are completely geographically I'm limited, so I'm just putting this up there. So if you see China over there on the left side of the photo, and there's Okinawa. Japan is to the north of Okinawa, and that little thing that's called Formosa, that's actually Taiwan. So if you're going straight south of there, not quite straight south, just southwest, you will hit the Philippines. And that is where, so if you go due west of Manila, you'll basically that's Vietnam. So just to give you some context in terms of where everything was, well, we were tasked to have Marines go there in presidential support. So it was kind of interesting because Bill Clinton, President Clinton at the time, like I call him like Bill Clinton, like he's my buddy. President Clinton was going to be in Manila for the G6, and they wanted the Marines there in presidential support. So what they were asking was, can we get a squadron of, or at least a detachment of, or some section of the CH-53s to Manila? Could we get them down there? And we had to figure it out mathematically. Now the distance from Okinawa to Manila, the CH-53s would not have had enough range to get straight from Okinawa to Manila without refueling. And I think they had to refuel, to be safe, I think they had to refuel twice. So it was interesting. So we had to kind of figure out if we could go, like where they could fly. And then if we were flying, if we flew too slow, because now we're not flying efficiently, were we going to burn up so much gas that we wouldn't be able to get ourselves there? So this is the type of mission planning that we had to do. Now, that wasn't super typical, but it wasn't that uncommon either. Now, I will admit, during this type of planning, I wasn't super involved in it. I was there, but me personally, I just kind of helped oversee what it was that was going on. I was, pulling out charts. I was definitely one of the junior guys in the NAB shop at the time, but watching it was interesting because the chief warrant officer, he was a CW03, technically he's below the rank of a lieutenant. So, this lieutenant that's straight out of OCS, technically a second lieutenant outranked this CW03 who'd been in the Marine Corps for like 20 plus years. But the squadron commander, the CEO, came down and said, "Hey, can we do this?" And it was interesting because the squadron didn't really move unless we kind of ran it through the navigation shop. And our chief warrant officer, good guy, great Marine, and just a kind of guy that you would just wanted to do good for. He was such a fantastic leader. And it was interesting that I got thinking about him today during the leadership conference for the Global Leadership Summit. So that's what we did. We did this mission planning, trying to figure out if we can get there. And we actually did. So it was really interesting that we got down there. Of course, we wanted to get back before Thanksgiving. And as a result, we had some hiccups and we had to go back but just stuff that probably shouldn't talk about, but it was good. It was a successful mission. Everything worked out well, and we got everybody home and without any real problems. So the question then is, does that sort of mission planning translate directly to what I do now as a strategist, as a life and business strategist for business owners and for for mom and pop, business owners who have kids at home who are just absolutely buried in what they're doing from day to day. And it's interesting because even though I'm looking at, look at the Herky Bird here, and that's exactly what the type of mission planning that we used to do. Yes, that is exactly what it is. The type of stuff that I'm doing now is we just kind of, from a mission planning perspective, you kind of take the metaphorical, like, okay, well, what do we have? What are its capabilities and where do we want to go? That's what you do. That's what a strategist does. And I feel like that's like what I'm doing now is what I've been groomed for my entire life. And I have this ability of knowing, okay, you tell me where you want to go, and I'm going to tell you, or then I need to know what you have at your disposal. What do you have that's good? What skills do you have? Let me see your balance sheet. Let me see your income statement. Let me see your ability to earn. What other people do you have? What other assets do you have? And sometimes people can go there straight away without any problem. They say, yep, this is something you can do. And you can manage the risk. One of the things that we had to do in this endeavor, right? And this endeavor right here was we had to manage the risk. We had to stop and say, well, what happens if what happens if the CH-53 couldn't plug in? They couldn't refuel, or they hit a dry plug and they couldn't, for whatever reason, we couldn't get fuel to flow. What would it take to get bingo fuel? Bingo fuel means the minimum fuel for them to get to a landing strip or get back to dry ground. So we had to figure that out. And if they couldn't, then we had to figure out, okay, well, let's where's the go, go no go zone. And we had to figure all that stuff out to make sure that everyone, like, we could manage the risk, that everyone was going to be safe. So it was it's pretty interesting that that's the other side of this equation that I work on, is managing people's risk and helping them say, okay, look, this is what it's going to, this is what you have. Do you have proof of concept? Is this just a wild stab? And if it doesn't work out, are you literally gambling everything on this one move? And and even though we wanted to get a handful of CH-53s down to Manila, was it worth risking the lives of however many crew members, not to mention the military assets that would be lost too, right? Like, obviously the lives were far more valuable than the loss of any air crew or aircraft, but we had to take all of it into account. And was it worth the risk? So we did decide that it was worth the risk. We could get people to, or we could get aircraft to a safe landing zone if things went sideways. And we were able to make that mission happen. And that's exactly what I do as a strategist, is I take out everything that they have that's good across this metaphorical table, from their cash, from their other assets, from their skill sets, from the people that I can maybe bring into the equation and help them out. So it was really neat as I'm sitting talking to this guy who was an H-60 pilot, and it was just it was neat that I was able to make that connection for him, and how he does his job and what he's doing now in terms of what he might be doing when he exits the military. So it's just a really great conversation with the guy today. So anyway, that's all I have. I really appreciate you sticking around. If you guys are interested in joining the let me find that thing again. If you are interested in joining the Facebook group, the Time Wealthy Advantage, I will put a link in the description. That is all I have. Tomorrow is day 2 of the Global Leadership Summit, so I will report back on that. And if you are an attendee, let me know. Let me know what your thoughts are around the Global Leadership Summit. It has been, I thought it was good. I thought the last speaker was really, really good. She got cut off by a couple minutes, which was kind of sucked because she was really, really good. She was she is the current CEO for TIAA CREF, and she was just unbelievable. Really, really powerful speaker, and just very real gal. So really appreciate it. All right, that's all I have. I'll see you guys next time.